Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So welcome to another new video on my YouTube channel. So this is my current watercolor art journal or sketchbook, and I've been working on it for 1 month and 1 week now, about 5 weeks, and sketching pretty much every single day of my surroundings, the places I go, and the sunset sky that I see outside my windows, lots of cafe sketches, spring flowers, spring landscape in my neighborhood park. And today I'm moving on to the very last spread of this sketchbook. And I'm going to show you the full process, drawing and painting on it. So I draw and paint everything from real life observations, not from photographs. So my posting of this page spread on Instagram have reached a very high number of views and likes. So as I mentioned before in my previous YouTube videos, I work on every single page from improvisation without any pre-planning. So yeah, so I think there's something special about this page spread that people likes a lot. So please let me know in the comment section of what you think about this page spread. The very first sketch that I put is this Vietnamese sandwich. So the last page spread is looking a little shorter because this is how the binding works. So I'm beginning to sketch the outline of the sandwich, which is kind of like a double boat shape. Finishing the one in the front first, and then starting to add the ham pieces in the middle, following the organic lines that I see, and a piece of cilantro that stands out, and adding some more ham and cilantro pieces standing out here and there, a lot of little zigzag lines. Yeah, so none of these cilantro leaves are looking perfect because they are squished in between the two bread pieces. And yeah, all of these shapes are very abstract. I'm engaging with what I see, but the lines, they are actually very abstract. And now I'm using these broken lines, very gentle pressure, to draw the crusty texture on the surface of the bread. It's toasted, so it's dry, it's very crusty. So when we're drawing, we really have to trust what we see and put those essential lines in there to make the thing that we're sketching more convincing and attractive and special. Add a little accentuation around the middle, and that's it for the drawing part. It's about a 5-minute drawing, and now I'm ready to add watercolors to bring this sandwich to life. So I just wetted the overall shape with clear water, and now adding the very first layer is a diluted medium yellow or cadmium yellow mixed with a little bit of lemon yellow. Yeah, very watery for the first layer because we need to show the contrast later with darker tones. And a little bit leftover orange mixed with pink, diluted so it looks more like a ham color. And grabbing a little bit cerulean blue mixed with a little bit of lime green to paint these light colored fresh green cilantros. And a little bit of orange red to paint these carrot slices. These are pickled carrots. They're sweet and sour. And blending on second layer, wet into wet, the mix of orange with a little bit burnt sienna. As you can see, I'm leaving some tiny gaps from the first layer to let it shine, to show the three-dimensional texture. And third layer, wet into wet, some raw umber to get the darkest tone of the bread. Adding this color very loosely so it can blend naturally with the previous layers. Okay, and now grabbing some verdant green to add on to the second layer of these cilantro leaves. Yeah, so pretty much all objects in the world, they're not just of one single layer of colors. If you meditate and look very carefully, you're going to see layers of colors. And same for the ham, a more intense pink with less water mixed in for the second layer of the ham. And let's see, pink mixed with orange. Yeah, and add it around the crust of the bread. It might be a reflective color from the table. Okay, so this is a very quick sketch, and now I'm ready to paint the shadow. I just wetted the shadow area with clear water and just adding on this mix of ultramarine blue, pink purple, or royal purple with a little bit green. And less water, more paint pigment, just around the edge. And another very gentle brush, just to let it blend with the previous layer of light gray. Nice and soft blending. And finally, I want to add a last layer of color for the bread crust. So a little bit yellow ochre mixed with burnt sienna, a little gentle strokes here and there. That's it. Moving on, in the afternoon, I'm sitting outside in the backyard and just really taking in these beautiful blooming rhododendrons. And of course, I'm going to sketch them. So when sketching a huge group of flowers like these, we really have to be selective. You don't have to sketch every single clusters of flowers that's right in front of you. So I'm drawing pretty big. I'm only planning to take in 3 or 4 clusters. Okay, I'm starting with the one somewhere on the top. So I just drew the overall outline of the whole big cluster and just fill in the outline with these petals in different positions. The shapes are very similar, but every single petal is actually slightly different in a different angle, slightly different sizes. And I'm starting to connect this piece of flower underneath it. So it's all about finding connections. And the one below, all of these little flowers have 5 petals joining together into one large cluster. And keep connecting more. Yeah, so overall these petals are about the same sizes. And starting to add these big green leaves around them here and there. There are not that many leaves. And adding bits of details around the middle of these flowers, the pollen area where the bees are landing, and keep adding another flower beside on the right, some more loose petals above and below. So none of these flowers are having a perfect shape, so that's why we're drawing from real life observations. We are learning that nothing in the world is looking perfect, but it doesn't mean that they're not beautiful. And this concept applies the same way to our drawings. We don't need to produce perfect drawings to make them look beautiful. What we need is the deep appreciation of life, of what we see, and just draw. And keep adding more leaves underneath here. There's a bit of overlapping here and there. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for the drawing part. Now I'm ready to paint watercolors. So again, just wetting those areas first with clear water by squeezing my water brush. The first layer, I'm grabbing some rose color or Rhododendron rose, magenta, diluted a little bit so it's not that intense. So as always, when painting the first layer of pretty much everything, it should be a pretty diluted color, not the most intense tone yet. Yeah, just punch the color on for all of these flower areas. And now I'm gradually blending on some more intense magentas containing less water and more paint pigment. So now there's a little bit more contrast and liveliness for these flowers. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to dry and just wetting those leaf areas with clear water and also the background area with clear water. Sometimes it's really important to wait for some areas to dry before you put any more colors on it. And just putting these dashes of magentas diluted here and there for those flowers in the background. We don't need to draw them, but we can use colors to suggest. And punching on these lemon yellow mixed with lime green. Very bright green color in the sunshine. And viridian green for these leaves. So when working with watercolors, it's very important to just lay the color on loosely, save those brush strokes, and let the paint flow into one another within control, but at the same time letting go without too much control. And yeah, just put on some medium green tones here and there. Now I'm ready to come back to these flowers. Just some more intense magenta with very minimal amount of water for the middle part of these flowers. The color is more intense because it's away from the sunshine. All of these petals are so close together, casting shadows on one another. Okay, so now I think it's time to be more brave and add these very intense tones, starting with the green. So viridian green mixed with blue, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of burnt sienna to get this intense green here and there in between the gaps of the leaves, underneath the flowers here and there. And at the same time, this shade color is kind of shaping the flowers, letting the flowers to stand out even better with contrast. Yeah, again, the contrast color is actually pretty minimal because there's actually a lot of sunshine shining over these flowers and leaves. And keep kind of adding some more mid-tones of green here and there. Yeah, and so at this point it's very important to knowing where those shade areas are and not over adding this shade color. Okay, and now I'm grabbing some purple or royal purple to paint the most intense shade for these flower petals here and there. Again, this color is pretty minimal. They're not everywhere on the flower, just a bit here and there, and it's pretty much diluted, not a very intense tone. Yeah, tiny dashes here and there with gentle brush strokes. Yeah, and around the last stage, our brush stroke, it doesn't have to be very, very strong, but still working on it with these final polish. I think that's it. And moving on, the next day, after teaching my live Zoom class after lunch, I want to sketch the blooming crab apple tree outside the living room window and on the other side of the courtyard, actually in my neighbor's backyard. On the other side, starting with a tree trunk, and then these branches and twigs sticking out from the flowers, and drawing the outline of the canopy, which is mainly crab apple blossoms, very, very heavy. Yeah, and just focusing on the outline without getting overwhelmed with all the details inside. So after doing the outline, I'm starting to add these very simple texture lines using squiggly lines here and there very loosely. If you can write, you can make these squiggly lines. And yeah, just here and there, not everywhere. I know there are hundreds and thousands of details on the tree, but we don't have to draw every single detail. Just a bit here and there, and add a little bit gentle lines to show the twigs, a little bit shade for the tree trunk and the branches. Okay, so that's it for the tree. Moving behind the tree on the upper right is the chimney, and then the outline of this pine tree covering the house. Starting to add the windows on the third floor of my neighbor, and exterior house textures and the layers. Another window for the second floor, color in the windows with solid black, because most windows during daytime, they look very, very dark. And a little roof here, adding some squiggly lines to show the texture of the pine tree, using these relaxing and abstract lines to suggest the foliage texture. Yeah, so most trees have these kind of squiggly lines. So you really have to decide how much you draw. You don't have to draw every single detail just on the tree. And keep adding some more house details behind these two trees. Yeah, texture on the chimney. And the railings. Some more little shapes. So a very important idea of sketching from real life observation is to sort things out. Okay, just relax, focus on one area at a time, and see every single thing into very simple geometric outlines and a bit of textures in there. Just add it in after one another. Now, starting to draw the brackets of the railings. Yeah, a lot of vertical lines, and just color them with solid black. So this scenery has more density. And also these railings are wrapping this scenery very well. So instead of stopping at the bushes, I decided to move a little lower to draw these railings, just to wrap this scenery much better. And after that, I'm starting to draw these vertical lines of this other house in the middle, and then the smaller shapes of the window frames, the windows. Drawing really fast because I've been drawing these houses so many times over the years. Yeah, and there's another thing that I want to share with you about sketching from real life observation is that you can stop at pretty much anywhere. As you can see, I'm not finishing drawing the rooftop. Part of the rooftop is actually outside the paper, and that's okay. I included the things that I want to include. The central thing is the crabapple tree, and these houses are pretty much just like supporting the crabapple tree, and it doesn't have to be a full view of these houses. Keep adding some more smaller shapes inside those larger shapes, like the doors and house textures, and keep drawing pretty fast. So I'm being really confident because I know that I don't have to be 100% the same as the real houses, like drawing it like an architect. Yeah, it's pretty much is highly accurate, and I'm happy with it. Now I'm ready to paint watercolors again. So just wetting the sky area, which is very little, with small bits of water, and putting on some diluted cerulean blue. The sky is very cloudy, but I do see a little bit cerulean blue around the horizon area, and just let it be. And now I just wetted the crabapple tree area with clear water, adding on some diluted medium yellow mixed with tiny bit of yellow ochre and tiny bit of orange, wet on wet, blending on some diluted magenta, because I do see some of the unopened blossoms, the buds, are of a very soft pink color. Grabbing some viridian green mixed with yellow ochre and diluted, put it very softly here and there to show the fresh new leaves in between the blossoms. This tree is actually very colorful. So the mission of an artist is not just to copy what they see with their biological eye, but to see more deeply and bring out those beautiful colors with paint to kind of exaggerate the beauty even more. Okay, and now I just loosely put on some very fresh green, radiant green, and lime green for the bushes and the lawn, right there on the bottom. For the evergreen tree, just play around with a dark tone of green, viridian green mixed with a little bit of yellow ochre or cadmium yellow. Play around mixing different kinds of yellows into viridian green or other kinds of dark greens to see what kind of organic colors that you get. Yeah, that's for the first layer of the evergreen tree. Now I just wetted the exterior of the houses with clear water and adding on bits of yellow ochre, very much diluted. This is the tone of these houses. Yeah, here and there. And for some of these little roofs is of a burnt sienna color. Burnt sienna mixing with a little bit of ultramarine blue, so the brown is darker. And using the same dark brown to paint the tree trunk and the large branches of the crab apple tree, so it looks stronger. Yeah, and also use very thin brush strokes to paint the little twigs. Okay, so moving on to the last stage, it's time to be brave and add some more contrast. So I just mix in a bit of brown or burnt sienna into viridian green to get this dark organic shade color of green leaves here and there, not everywhere. The shade area for most objects during daytime is actually pretty minimal. If you add too much, your object is going to look way too dark. So just a bit here and there. Some brush strokes can be almost invisible. Just paint that green door. Add a little bit reflective yellow for the windows. Windows, they're glasses, so they can reflect colors around them. And paint the concrete walkway a little bit with leftover yellow because there's sunshine. The concrete doesn't look gray, it looks a bit of yellowish. Adding some darker green tones of contrast here and there for the little bush down here. And just grab some leftover gray to paint those white division areas here and there for in between the sections of the house, a little bit shade underneath the little roof. Yeah, just a bit of shade. This is mostly a pretty bright, nostalgic, yellowish tone for the exterior of these houses. And also painting these windows with a darker gray tone. Yeah. The windows, the colors of them can be very subtle during daytime, reflecting a lot of colors and shade. Just some very final polish here and there with leftover grays. There's a little pink purple bush right there on the left corner. Just grabbing a very intense brown for the crab apple trunk and branches, just so this tree look even stronger. This is the central object for my page spread. And I want it to be very strong with lots of contrast and be brave adding that super dark tone. And same for this evergreen tree because it's in the foreground. It needs some stronger colors. And these choppy brush strokes shows the texture of this tree even better. This is pretty much a mix of viridian green with a little bit brown. And also mixing more or less water each time, so every single brush stroke is a different color. And I think that's pretty much it. And I have enough dark tones in this sketch to show contrast, a lot of dark tones for the windows and for the tree trunks, for the foliage here and there. Yeah, nicely balanced. I like it, and it's time to stop. And here is the look of my finished art journal spread. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you like my video, please click like and leave me a comment below. Subscribe to my channel for weekly updates so you never miss a new video on my channel. And have a great weekend. Have a great day, everyone. See you next time.